What's up, everybody? I'm back, and so's Dead Rising and Superman. Let's talk about it. So let me start by addressing the elephant in the room. I have not uploaded to this channel in way too long, like nearly 5 months, way too long. And I really appreciate any of you who are here for coming back and being patient with me during this time. I know that one of the most important things a content creator can do is be consistent with content, and I have not been that. I've been out of town recently. I went to Italy on a family trip, and it was a great time. We had an amazing time. I was playing around with the idea of making sort of a travel blog video about it, but that didn't seem like the kind of content that you guys usually come here for, so I don't know. Let me know if you want to see that. I took a bunch of pictures. I could tell you about what we did. And then on top of that, normally I pretty much just talk about the video game industry, and the last couple months have been really depressing in the games industry in terms of layoffs and studio closures and just like weird, bad, like immoral business decisions across the board. And I could have very easily made a lot of videos about that, and probably honestly should have. It would have been good for the algorithm if nothing else. But I didn't really want to dogpile on all the negativity. It's this sort of situation where I imagine that all of you were already seeing enough of that in your feed, and I also just didn't really want to pile that on top of myself either, because it's just this constant deluge of bad news, it feels like, lately. But recently, I'm actually more excited for video games than I have been in a very long time, thanks largely to that Xbox showcase. So I'm back, and I'm more energized to make content than I have been in a very long time. So again, thank you for being patient with me. But let's get to what you actually came here for, the news. And if you hadn't heard, Capcom just announced that they're doing their own E3 sort of press conference. They're calling it Capcom Next, and it's going to happen on July 1st, which is about 2 days from when I'm recording this. And it does seem like it's going to be a pretty small show. They told us it's going to be 20 minutes long, and that it's going to primarily feature 3 games. It's Path of the Goddess, which is that sort of almost Onimusha looking game that they've shown off in a couple of like Xbox showcases. Resident Evil, I think 7, maybe some of the others going to iPhone and iPad. And then the third, and by far most interesting to me, is that they announced Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster. I love the Dead Rising series, almost all of the games, and we'll get to that. The original game was one of the reasons why I bought a 360, which is saying a lot, because before that I was kind of a PlayStation guy. Like, I grew up with a PlayStation 2, so Dead Rising was the game that convinced me to swap over to Xbox, and I've stayed there since. So really, it's all Dead Rising's fault. Way to go, Capcom. I didn't actually switch over, though, until 2009, whenever Modern Warfare 2 came out, because that was the game that was bundled with my 360 when I got it. So it took me a while to finally switch over to that generation. I was still pretty young at the time, so I didn't have money to like buy consoles. But as soon as I got the 360, the 2 games I knew I had to play were Fallout 3 and Dead Rising. It was just, there was something special about it. The number of zombies on screen, the way that they filled up the mall, the fact that you could pick up anything and use it as a weapon, like, that was all super duper interesting to me. I was so excited to get into it. And then it was one of the rare games that you play and it completely matches your expectations. It does the thing that I most want to do in the zombie apocalypse, which is rescue people and protect them and get them out of the situation. A lot of zombie games do the thing where they're like telling this really sad, prolonged story about like all my children dying or whatever, and like, that's fine and it has its place, but there's been so much of that. I just want to be dropped into this world and try to make it a better place. Like, that's what I want to do in a zombie apocalypse. And Dead Rising was one of the first games that I played that let me feel like I was doing that, even though some of the AI on those survivors was so frustrating that I kind of wanted to leave them behind. But that franchise continued to be good for a really long time. Dead Rising 2, also a fantastic game. I arguably like it better than the first one. There's certain aspects of it that I think are better. I think the AI on the survivors, for one, is better. I think some of the locations are a little bit more interesting. Dead Rising 3 is also pretty good. I think it loses a lot of what I love about Dead Rising, and that's when it sort of starts making the switch to like, oh, people love the combo weapons. Let's just make it about killing zombies in silly ways instead of like surviving. And also, you like couldn't rescue survivors. I mean, you could, but then there were so few of them, and then you were like using them as party members to do stuff. Like, I don't. It wasn't what I was looking for. And then Dead Rising 4 was just a complete trash fire. So hopefully this remaster doesn't take any inspiration from 4. I'm hoping that this is a return to form where they go back to doing the things in Dead Rising that we all loved about it, because I can't be the only person who didn't like Dead Rising 4. I'm pretty sure it was universally panned. The only thing we know from the teaser that they showed us right now is that the voice actor from Dead Rising 4 is returning, because Frank West originally was voiced by this guy, Terrence Rotolo. I didn't know this off the top of my head. I had to Google it. And then in Dead Rising 4, he was replaced by Ty Olsson. And based on the voice in the little teaser they gave us, I'm pretty sure it's Ty again. So hopefully that's the only thing they're taking from 4, because like I don't necessarily think he's a bad voice actor. The writing for him was awful and made me want Frank to die, which, spoilers, he kind of did, so I guess I got what I wanted. But this is, for me, and we're going to get all this information really soon, but for me, I'm hoping this is just a complete return to form. I don't want to see a bunch of like new modes tacked on. I don't want to hear that they're changing the story. I don't want to hear, oh, we've added combo weapons to it. Like, I don't want that at all. I just want the original Dead Rising brought forward to new consoles, looking all pretty and shined up. That's all I want. And as soon as Capcom has proven to me that when it comes to Dead Rising, they're able to color inside the lines again, then I will start trusting them to go out and push the envelope and make decisions about what Dead Rising can be going forward. Capcom has done a great job in recent history of making remakes and remasters with the Resident Evil series. This seems like it's a step back from that already, because they're calling it a remaster and not a remake. So I'm not expecting anything huge like that. I just need them to stick the landing on this, because it's been way too long since we've got a Dead Rising game, and even longer since we've gotten a good one. So please, Capcom, do it for me. And speaking of hopefully not messing something up, we also got a bunch of photos leaked from the set of James Gunn's new Superman movie. And I think it's looking pretty good, guys. Like, I think we got a good shot of finally getting a good Superman movie. Fingers crossed, again. But a couple things I want to mention before we get into this. Number one, there were a lot of photos leaked that showed a lot of spoilers for things that are going to happen in this movie. I'm not going to show those photos, and I'm not going to talk about the plot spoilers that were shown in those photos. We're just going to talk about Superman's suit and Mr. Terrific's suit. Those are the only spoilers I'm going to talk about here. If you don't want to see those, feel free to go elsewhere. If you're still here, cool, let's get into it. Second of all, these photos were leaked by the city of Cleveland themselves, which seems like a bad idea. Like, they posted this on their own social media to be like, look, they're filming this movie here. But like, if you want people to continue filming movies in Cleveland, you probably shouldn't put out spoilers for those movies, because they're not gonna want you to do that. Like, the studios are probably not thrilled that this happened. So sorry, Cleveland. Wouldn't expect to get a whole lot of people filming things in your city in the near future. Oops. But anyway, let's talk about this Superman costume, because I think it looks phenomenal. Number one, we got the trunks back. We haven't had them for a while, which I understand. A lot of people feel like they look goofy. I don't necessarily think that. I think they can look goofy, but at least in this instance, I think they look pretty good, or at least as good as they can look. And Superman has this unfortunate thing just in general where I think his costume is uniquely difficult to convey to a movie, at least a modern movie, because at the end of the day, he's a guy wearing a leotard with his underwear on the outside of it. And like, that's a tough thing to not make look goofy. It looks fine in a comic book because you can draw it however you want and change it, panel to panel, so it never looks like a leotard with your underwear on the outside. But when you have to put it on a real person and shoot it on a real set, it's hard to do that. So they've made some changes to the classic formula here, and I think pretty much all of them are ones that I appreciate. Number one, let's talk about the cape with that big, nice yellow S on the back. I think that looks great. The colors on it, and actually just the whole suit, are so bright and so vibrant. It really shows off that sort of vibrant Boy Scout energy that Superman is supposed to have, and we haven't seen from him for a while. So I'm glad that they're going that direction. I'm sure that they'll color correct it in certain scenes so that it's not like overpowering or whatever, because there are going to be some lighting circumstances where like maybe you don't want it to look that bright, and we saw that in the original photo that they showed off where it was like battle damaged. So there's going to be scenarios where it doesn't look super cartoony, but I'm glad that at least in its base form it is this bright, vibrant, hopeful design. I think that that's great. One thing that I've heard people be sort of mixed on that I personally love is the collar. It's got sort of a raised collar on it that comes up not far, maybe an inch and a half, and that separates the neck from the cape. And I think that's a great idea. A lot of old Superman costumes had this, I'm going to call it a problem. Some people prefer it, and it is more like the classic Superman suits, where the cape goes all the way to the neck. And when you pair that with a kind of loose-fitting, like low-cut collar on a leotard shirt, what that ends up looking to me like is like a Goodwill Superman t-shirt with a blanket tucked into the collar. And so I'm glad that this has made it look more like a uniform, more like a suit, more like something that a superhero would actually wear and fight and fly in, as opposed to something he grabbed off like a clothesline and flew away in. Which, and again, I know that that's the appeal for the old suits in some cases. Like the classic Superman suit is something that's supposed to have been built by Ma and Pa Kent, like from pieces of random fabric that was in Superman's spacesuit or spaceship, I'm pretty sure. Like the cape was a blanket he was wrapped up in, I'm pretty sure, and it's like fireproof, right? So that was, I understand why it looked the way that it did in the past. It was supposed to look like it was made by two old folks in the middle of Kansas, but I much prefer this look personally. And the lines on it, I know that that's another sort of point of contention. I don't mind them. I can sort of take or leave them. I think that they do a good job of breaking up the shape, because again, if you just put a guy in a blue shirt, it's going to look really blocky and just kind of bland. So I think the idea of putting those lines on it is just to break up the shape and make it look better in motion and on film. So I'm okay with it. I know that that's been a thing that people have been sort of down with in the MCU lately, where they're like, why are they taking all these suits and adding all these lines? And it's like, again, when you make this translation from comic book panel to being worn by a real human being, there are certain things that you need to do to make it look good. So I don't mind them. I don't necessarily love them. I understand why they exist. And then, actually, I think that's pretty much it. Like, I know that one of the other things that people have complained about with this suit is that it looks like it's kind of loose fitting, that it's kind of baggy. I think that's just because of the scene that they're shooting. He's clearly running and moving a lot, and so they want it to be flexible so that David Corenswet can move in the thing. In a lot of superhero movies, what they'll do is they have a bunch of different versions of the suit that they wear for different shots, so it fits tighter in certain places that are going to be being used in those particular shots, and they'll, swap out from one scene to another. And then on top of that, also, they'll probably go in and like remove wrinkles from it in the editing after the film has been shot. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. It's hard to completely judge a suit based on blurry, distant photos taken voyeuristically from some fan on their cell phone, as opposed to what it's going to look like in the final movie. So things like that, like the color and it being baggy, those things are probably going to be changed to some extent in the final product. So I wouldn't worry about them too much if they're a thing that you're worried about. But I'm very happy with this suit. It does kind of look like the New 52 suit, but just made out of leather instead of like metal, which is good because I never liked how shiny and like armor-ish it looked in the New 52. But this takes some of the design elements of that and modernizes it, whatever, to a point where I think it looks really great on him. And quite frankly, David Cornsweet looks outstanding in the suit. Like, he fills it out well. He looks so much like Superman. And then also we saw him as Clark Kent. And if you put those two guys next to each other, I would not know that they were the same guy. They change up his hair. They put on a sort of bulky, ill-fitting suit so it changes up the way his body is shaped. I think it's a really great idea. They're doing some good stuff with this, and I'm very, very excited about it. And then the second suit that we saw, majorly, we saw a couple other suits. Like, we saw the engineer and some other characters that I won't name. Their suits were mostly just like a leather suit, and so I'm not going to really go into that. And also, I couldn't show them to you without showing the spoiler photos, so I'm not going to do it anyway. But just know that the engineer suit just looks like it's just a suit. It's just a lady in black. But Mr. Terrific, I think also, by and large, looks great. I have one small complaint about it, but by and large, I think it looks great. Mr. Terrific. They managed to make the T mask that I think in general is kind of dumb. They made it look really good. Like, there's something about the way that it lines the lips and the eyes that looks genuinely intimidating and cool. I didn't think they'd be able to do it, so I'm glad that I was wrong on that regard. Way to go, James Gunn and crew. And then the jacket with the fair play down the arm and fair life across the back, like, that's a great jacket. That's 100% going to be something that people are going to want to buy and wear in their real life. This is cool. As a first real showing of Mr. Terrific in live action, I know we had him in the CW verse, but I don't really count that because it was television. People didn't really watch a lot of it. But like a major showing for this character, I think he looks absolutely fantastic. My only complaint is the hair. I think Mr. Terrific's hair is a little poofier than I would want it to be. Like, it kind of stands off his head more than I would have expected from like photos of the character in the comic book panel, and I think that does make him look a little 80s. Like, I don't think people really wear their hair like that anymore, at least not that I've seen recently, at least. So I think that's a bit much. I'm sure it'll be fine. It's such a tiny nitpick, but I think it does look a little weird. Like, it does make him look a little dated, in my opinion, maybe a little cosplay-ish also. Because it almost doesn't look like it's real hair, which it very well may not be. I don't know what Eddie Gathegi's real hair looks like. I don't know if he has styled it that way himself, but it doesn't look quite right to me. Then also his build is a little thinner than I would have expected. This is a character who's supposed to be basically a Batman type, so he's pretty buff. He knows a bunch of different martial arts, and he can whip an ass when he needs to. And looking at Eddie Gathegi here, I don't necessarily think that he could. He's looking a little thin. I'm sure that it won't really matter too much in the movie because he's going to have other powers and things going on and superheroes around him. So I'm sure it won't matter, but it is just something that I'm noticing from these set pictures, is that he's not quite the build that I would have expected from this particular superhero. But the suit itself, absolutely 10 out of 10. The jacket, the mask, the gloves, everything looks perfect. It looks comic accurate in a way that is appealing but not goofy. There's a lot of comic book suits that can look really stupid in live action. I think this one has made the translation very, very well. So I'm excited for this movie. There were a lot of things that we saw in it that I won't talk about that excite me for what the plot of the movie is going to be. I still maintain my sort of trepidation about how many characters have already been announced to be in the movie, and then on top of the fact that the pictures spoil a couple other characters who show up in it that I don't think were announced previously. So it does start to give me the feeling of like James Gunn just kind of wants to play with all of his toys at the same time, and I don't think that that's a good idea. But James Gunn is really good at ensemble pictures. He's done a lot of them in the past with Guardians and Suicide Squad and things like that. It's sort of his bread and butter. So if anybody can make this work, it is him. it is a red flag for me to have this many toys thrown out onto the floor in the first outing. It was one of the big mistakes that the DCEU made, and I see it being repeated here, hopefully to better effect. At least we can say that the suits look better, and I think the casting is better. So we're at least a head and shoulder above the previous outing. Hopefully we can exceed it even more than that. But man, I'm really excited for this, and it comes out about a year from right now. It's like July 20 something of next year. So we don't have too long to wait, and we'll probably get a lot more trailers and things to fill us in the middle there. So this is going to be a good one. I'm really excited about it. But again, as always, let me know what you think about all this in the comments down below. Are you excited for a Dead Rising remaster? Do you think that the new Superman suit actually looks terrible? I want to hear about it in the comments. If you like this video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with a friend. We're getting pretty close to 1,000 subscribers, and we can start doing some exciting things once we hit that number. So help me out as much as you can. I'd really appreciate it. And until next time, I'll see you around.